Welcome everyone to another Tech 90. Today you got myself, Greg Brunts. I'm the National Tech Support Specialist for Commercial Product with GREE here. And we also have Jesus. Jesus, you want to introduce yourself?
Hey everyone, it's Jesus Fraga, commercial VRF inside sales engineer.
All right, so today we're going to be discussing MultiPRO startup and commissioning. In segment one, we're going to be going through a quick start guide walkthrough, indoor unit check, and proper startup and commissioning. After that, we will come back and chat with you live and answer any questions. Then we will continue with another section of training to cover header installation, Y branch installation, tips when using shielded wiring, MultiPRO condensers explained, pre-charged or not. I think you guys like that little snippet of a video we got there. MultiPRO basic layout rules, startup commissioning of GMV6 Ultra, and we also have one from our Talking Comfort Live. We want to replay that, which GREE Response suggests an alternative method for debugging GMV Ultra during startup. And finally, we will finish up with another live Q&A session. We encourage you to get into the conversation. As a reminder, if you have questions or comments at any time during this broadcast, use the question mark icon to the right of the screen and send them our way. We'll answer any relevant questions until we run out of time. Again, guys, keep it on topic. Make sure that the questions are pertaining to the product that we are talking about today. We only have a limited time for our broadcast, and we need to make sure we stay on point. So with that, let's roll right into it. Let's get started. But first, why do we choose this topic to highlight? Quick Start Guide. I think it's important that a lot of guys don't know that Quick Start Guide is out there. I want you to know it's there. And then I kind of go through it and give you a good, thorough understanding of that Quick Start Guide, and also some in going through that, I also added a little bit into it when I talk about the GREE controllers and how you set that for the number of indoor units that you're going to be controlling. So that's very important. It's a misstep by a lot of guys that we've taken phone calls from out in the field. It's not complicated, but if you know how to do it up front, it just makes things easier. So, all right. So with that, we're going to go ahead and run that video. Before we get into the actual commissioning of the unit, I think it's important that we cover some steps and make sure that we've got that machine actually ready to go and ready to be started up. So kind of checks and balances. So I think our Quick Start Guide does a really good job of giving you reminders of, not only if you're going to install it, hey, how do I do this or how do I do that, but it's also going to be a little reference guide for you to say, make sure you did do everything right. So I think it's important in this that we're going to go through that Quick Start Guide a little bit and kind of show you what you need to know. So with that, all right, so let's jump into our website at greecomfort.com. We can get to our Quick Start Guide just by going to Resources. You go to Documents. You'll see System Documentation and Literature there. We'll click on that. And then it takes you into all of our documentations. And if you go on the left-hand side over here, you got these skip tos, which I really like. If you go to MultiPRO, then you have MultiPRO, but you also have MultiPRO Heat Pump, MultiPRO Ultra Heat. Since the video is going to be on Ultra Heat, we'll just go ahead and go to that one. Once we're there, we go to Quick Start Guide, click on that. And we built this Quick Start Guide so you guys don't have to go through a whole installation manual all the time. So with that, we can go down. You'll see Heat Pump. Please read this first. So keep in mind, this doesn't apply to our previous version Ultra. So the GMV-XX WLB, there's the key right there, the WLB. You don't actually have a debugging process to that unit. So in this, that's what we mean in that note there, is that there is no commissioning to that unit. That unit you basically install, hopefully you got it all installed right, and you just go in and turn the system on. But now the MultiPRO versions, the Ultra current offering that we have and the standard, both have to be commissioned. So they're not really talking about the wiring and stuff. That's all the same. Anyway, it's like a mini split system. It's a little different in that I like to point this out too. On a mini split, You're going to put power to the outdoor unit, and then you're going to run a 14-4 wire to each individual head, and that powers those indoor heads. MultiPRO is different. You are going to put power to the outdoor unit. You are going to have a separate power source to your indoor units. And then you're going to use an 18-2 stranded comm wire that is going to go from D1 to D2 and daisy chain through. Significant difference. I like this image because it just says, hey, let's make sure we got this thing hooked up right, realizing it's not a mini split. We don't want 14-4 wire to these MultiPRO units. You could actually damage the unit if you're putting line voltage to them D1 and D2 terminals. So let's make sure we got it all hooked up properly. All right, so moving on. This is a little bit more on the wiring. This is the outdoor units terminal block for your L1 and your L2 and your ground. And then over here is your D1 and D2 and your G1 and G2. We can talk more about that later on. But D1 and D2 is our communication circuit to our indoor units. We show you a picture of a grounded shielded wire here because that's what grounded shielded wire looks like. We don't require you to have grounded shielded cable. But if you run grounded shielded cable, you would absolutely want to go ahead and hook it up. There's no reason for you not to if you already got it. Okay. Just keep in mind when you're doing grounded shielded wiring, it has to be done properly. So you only ground it outside. And then inside, you're going to splice this. And I tell guys all the time, you got two different cables here, the actual cable. Take them ground wires and just twist them together and lay them back on the cable and wrap them up with electrical tape. You do that, you've got a solid enough connection. You don't even need to use a wire nut. And we ensure that that ground's not touching anything on the indoor units. We do not want that ground touching anywhere. But you got to carry it through. So if this is your first unit, you need to splice here, splice at your second unit, terminate at the last unit. Really all you want to do is cut that off and just make sure it can't touch anything. Then we do show you the end line resistor on D1 and D2. This is shipped in the outdoor unit. It's a 1/4 watt, 120 ohm. It says it right here on the quick start guide in case you guys forget. We do not source these, so be very careful when you're installing these units. That comes shipped in the bag in the outdoor unit. Please don't throw it away. But if you do and you need some, I've said this multiple times, go to Amazon. You can order 100 of those for like $6. Just make sure they're 120 ohm and 1/4 watt. So if you're getting ready to start up a unit and you don't have that resistor, and it's a simple MultiPRO job like this, go ahead and commission that unit and start it. But I still would come back and put that resistor on there. Just a little refresher, the indoor units are auto address. On the wire controllers, you can set that main indoor unit. If the indoor unit is not the one you want it to be, you can go to any one of the controllers and make that unit the master or the main indoor unit. If you have a wireless controller, you set the mode to fan, set the temp to 86 degrees or 30 degrees Celsius. Press down and up 3 times quickly. UC will display on the indoor unit, and this sets the unit to the main indoor unit. That's very important that you talk with the homeowner and make sure they understand the master controls the mode. So if the master is in heat mode, the rest of the units can only work in heat mode. If the master or the main indoor unit is in cooling, then all of the indoor units can only be in cooling. Keep that in mind. Make sure you explain that to the homeowner. Make sure the homeowner or end user also knows that when you switch modes, like you go from wintertime and heating to cooling, make sure you go back to each one of those rooms and make sure the set point's where you want it to be, because whatever your set point was in heating, if you only change it on the main indoor unit, that's the set point that's going to be held in cooling mode now. So let me give you an example of that. If you have 2 indoor units, one's your main indoor unit, one's a slave. If you go change that main indoor unit from heating to cooling, and you say you set it at 75 degrees, let's say, and then the other unit was set all the way down to 61 degrees in heating. If you don't go and change that, it's now going to have a set point held at 61 degrees. So keep that in mind. Controller wiring. All of the GREE controllers come set up 1-to-1. In other words, this controller is set up to control one indoor unit. You can control up to 16 indoor units with one GREE controller. And it is done and wired in the daisy chain pattern, just like you would do the D1 and D2 wiring. You do your daisy chain like this. Now I can control all three of these units from that one controller. Keep in mind, you have to go into that controller and set it for that, of how many indoor units it's going to control. So let me show you how we do that. So this is an XE7C. I'll give you this one for an example. This is the main screen you will see. Just hit OK, menu OK, and then it's going to take you to the next screen, which is going to show you view, timer, function, and set. Use your arrow keys left and right to get the set. Hit the menu OK button again. That's going to bring you to the next page. Then you go under user parameters, highlight that. You can use your up and down arrow keys to highlight it. Hit the menu OK button again. And then that's going to take you to user parameters. I've already skipped it to page 2. So you use your up and down arrow keys to scroll through the pages. Actually, you can use the left and right ones too. They'll as long as you're highlighted up here, it'll let you scroll pages. But if you're highlighted here, it's going to be changed. Like say you wanted to change this from no to yes, then you use left and right keys. If you want to go page to page, the easiest thing to do is up and down keys. So I've already done that, just showing you page 2, because I want to point this out right here. I would scroll with my arrows down to number of indoor units, and if we go by the wiring diagram I just showed you, we had 3 indoor units. You would change this to 3. This controller does not care how many indoor units are on the system. It only cares about how many indoor units you have attached to this controller. If that is set wrong, when you go to commission this unit, you're going to get an L9 error code, and it's going to keep you from commissioning the unit. So don't do that. All right, so moving on here, some more things on the quick start guide. Just in case you are doing a wall mount and you need to hook up a wire controller, these yellow and white wires right here, that actually goes up on the board to H1 and H2. These controllers are hardwired with just 18-2 stranded wire, just like your comms wire. So you're not going to have a Molex plug. So just cut that off and you wire nut to yellow and white, and it is not polarity sensitive. One other thing I want to cover with you, just to make sure, before you start up that system and get it all addressed and ready to go, if you've got if you're doing this on a small business, or maybe just a large home and you've got multiple condensers and you have the potential for adding either cool automation or central controller, do yourself a favor and preset this unit. Get it all ready to go. Whether they decide to do it or not doesn't matter. So what you want to do is, however many outdoor units you have, hook your wiring up from G1 and G2. So it's just a daisy chain pattern, just like you did before. You had daisy chain from G1 to G2 all across the outdoor units. You don't have to have the wires going to the controller yet. You can just daisy chain across the units and stop there. Then, and this is before you ever apply power or anything, before you commission the unit, then we're going to go in here, we're going to set these dip switches so that when you start this thing up, it's going to have unique addresses and we don't duplicate. If you do them all separately and then you want to combine them as far as central control or cool automation goes, you're going to have a problem. Say you were at system 1 was all by itself. You commission that unit, it's going to address them more than likely 1, 2, 3, 4. And then if you do system 2 standalone all by itself, it's going to address them 1, 2, 3, 4. So then when you try to put central control or cool automation in, you got duplicated addresses and it's going to give you a fault. That's why I'm telling you, just err on the side of caution, whether the customer wants it or not. Go ahead and hook up the G1 and G2 wiring, and then while the systems are still powered off, go in and set these unique addresses. So outdoor unit number 1, you don't set the dip switches. They're factory going to be all on. GREE's a little different. 0 means on, 1 means off. So if I'm going to make my second unit be unit number 2, all I got to do is turn dip switch 1 off. The rest remain on. That becomes unit number 2. If I got 3 units, then I would set the third unit dip switch 2 off and leave all the rest of the dip switches on, and so on, all the way up to we can combine up to 16 outdoor units. So just kind of an FYI of how you save yourself some headache later on. I'm going to skip over to the reason why I skipped over that, just so you know, we've got a video that kind of talks about all those basic layout rules. So you want to make sure you followed those rules. Again, it's just a little bit of a reminder, just making sure you guys got that unit ready to be installed, because ready to be commissioned, because I'd rather you find out before you commissioned it that you did something wrong, go in and get that corrected, and then come back and commission the unit. So, but on 3, 4, and 5 ton, kind of a little, just want to pass this out to everybody, make sure you guys know the service valves on all 3 of those units, 3, 4, and 5 ton, are all 3/4. So if you're doing 3 ton or 4 ton, that uses a 5/8 gas pipe. Use these dog legs that come with it, or another adapter if you want. This is already flared for you, and your 5/8 pipe will slide right into that dog leg, and you can braze it right there. These actually turn pretty nice and set you up to turn to go out through the unit anyway, and might save you some bending some pipe and stuff like that anyway. However you guys want to do it, just keep in mind that the service valves themselves are going to take a 3/4 gas pipe, not 5/8. 5 ton is the only one that's going to use the 3/4. So just kind of an FYI. Another thing I want to point out real quick, on the Ultra machines, make sure we've removed these shipping brackets for the compressor. There's 2 of them on there. They give you this big attention notice there. Hopefully you've seen it. So before you commission this unit, go in there and take these metal brackets off of there and put the nut back on there. Get rid of those. Another thing I want to cover too is, hey, before you start this thing up, let's do a pressure check. Make sure this thing holds pressure. So hit it with 150 psi of nitrogen. Make sure it holds for 3 minutes. Remember, you need to be putting that in through both sides of the system. I'm not going to guarantee you those indoor EEVs are open. Unlike a mini split, the EEVs are located in the indoor units. So when you're pulling a vacuum and when you're pressure testing, make sure you're charging into the pressure into both lines and you're evacuating from both lines. So 150 pounds for 3 minutes, then increases to 325, make sure it holds for 5 minutes, increase to 500 and hold for 1 hour. Evacuation. We kind of put this together, you know, it's better to make sure you got a good, clean, dry system. So we want you to pull it down to 4,000 microns, break it with nitrogen. You don't need a bunch of pressure there when you break with nitrogen. About 3 psi is plenty just to displace any air that might be in there. And each time you do this, you're going to find it's going to pull a vacuum much faster. So 4,000 microns for the first pull, 1,500 microns for the second pull, and your last pull, you want to be down 500 microns or less. And then let it hold for an hour. Make sure it does not rise over 1,000 microns. If it don't rise over 1,000, you can rest assured you should be pretty well leak free. An additional charge. So on the standard models, the ones that don't have the 2 V's in it, the Ultras have the 2 V's. I'm going to go back real quick and show you that. You'll see V in that model. That's Ultra. Here, these are all standard, no double V's. You can manually calculate that charge. Use only the liquid line for calculating an additional charge. Only 1/4 inch and 3/8 are used. Multiply each length by the ounces per foot in the chart. You need to add 10.5 ounces per indoor unit over 2. If 2 or less, ignore this additional charge amount. Add the total for the 1/4 and the 3/8 and the indoor unit amounts. So let me give you an example. So let me give you your charge amounts first. Length of a 1/4, use 0.24 as your multiplier. 3/8, you're going to use 0.58. Add those two numbers together, plus whatever you need for any units over 2 is 10.5 ounces. So for an example here, if I had 45 feet a quarter times 0.24, that gives me 11 ounces. I have 18 feet of 3/8 at 0.58, that gives me 10 ounces. Total number of indoor units, I have 3, so I need to add 10.5 ounces because we got one more than the 2. That gives me a total additional charge of 31.5 ounces. On the Ultras, you have to use selection software or a system builder for your additional charge amount. Reason why we did that is because it gets a little bit too involved to do the math to calculate that. It is in the service manual. If you guys want to, do the math, go right ahead. The reason why I'm going to tell you to use our system builder or selection software is because it's so much easier. I can go on selection software and calculate that charge a lot faster. I've showed that before, but while we're on here real quick, I will go to where that is located on our website. So let me go under the contractor tab. If you go right here, here's our system builder app. And if you go to the home page, right here, MultiPRO selection software, right there's where you download under contractor tab as well. So there you go. Either one, and that software, just make sure it's Windows based if you download it. And we've done some videos just recently. It was more on the commercial side, but Robert Arrayes actually did that. And he shows you how to use that selection software. So if you go to some of our latest videos we did on commercial product, kind of introduction to commercial, MultiPRO commercial, take a look at that video, and Robert does a great job in part 2 of that session explaining you how to use selection software. I use it all the time. It works very well. So with that, we'll move on to the next segment of this Tech 90. All right, we're back. So I hope you enjoyed that segment of going through that quick start guide. Don't forget about the ask a question button on the right hand side of your screen. Again, if you got questions, please, throw them at us. We'll do our best to answer them. So, Jesus, do we have any questions in there now?
Not currently. No, we do not.
The next segment, we'll talk about that a little bit. Okay. So we're going to have segment 2. It's a series of videos that I've went through that I feel like we need. Some of them you may have already seen. Maybe you have, maybe you haven't. But we're going to be covering header installation, Y branch installation, and I thought about this hard. I could actually show some pictures, and we have plenty of them, of these headers not being installed properly and Y branches not being installed properly. So it's very important that we follow the best practices in the installation instructions, and we actually install those headers and those Y branches properly. So those are 2 videos that James did a while back, and I think he does an excellent job of explaining that. So whether you've seen it or not, at least it's a reminder to you to make sure that we're following the rules that are required in installing those header and Y branches. Tips when using shielded wiring. Again, we don't require you to use shielded wiring. Highly recommend it, because if you do get any interference, whether it be from fluorescent lights, it'd be from, if you got all kinds of other cabling running through a building, there's the things that can interfere with communication circuits is endless. Line voltage wires real close to your communication wires, all that kind of stuff. By using the grounded shielded cable and grounding that properly, you can shield a lot of that away and just have a better chance of not having a callback or having problems and getting communication errors. The other segment is MultiPRO condensers explained. We kind of talk about, which one, how they're charged. Are they charged for additional line set, or are they not? So that was another segment that came from one of our Talking Comfort lives that I thought it was important to reinforce that as well. The MultiPRO basic layout rules. James does a great job of explaining those multi-pro basic layout rules. Again, I want everybody to know, just because if you have a job that is going to require you going outside of those basic layout rules, it doesn't mean you can't do it. It just means you're going to have to lay it out in selection software to make sure you can do it. So keep that in mind. The basic layout rules are really so that it simplifies it and makes it easier for you to go out and, throw a tape measure down and figure out a job and give a bid without having to run it through selection software to make sure you're going to be able to do what it is you're trying to do. Okay. And a lot of applications, you can follow those basic layout rules and you don't have to worry about it. You can bid that. You already know your pipe sizes and everything, because obviously, the longer your line sets and stuff are, your price is going to change. If I got to use 400 feet of pipe versus 200 feet of pipe, there's going to be a significant difference in that price on that quote. So, I mean, I'm being extravagant there, but it does change the price. So you want to be fairly accurate in your measurements and layouts and stuff like that. So then we go into the startup and commissioning of the GMV6 Ultra, exactly what steps you need to take. It is on the service panel, but we kind of go through what the machine's doing as well. And then from another one of our Talking Comfort Lives, I want to replay this again because it suggests an alternate method for debugging the GMV Ultra during startup. So I think we answer it well. It was a YouTube comment. But anyway, I'll let you guys see that one for yourself if you haven't already seen it. So got some more questions coming in.
Yeah, definitely do. So, okay, so we missed this one. Looks like he had commented this a couple of days ago. It's Charles. He said, if I'm busy, can I view this at a later date? Most contractors have scheduled installations during the meeting times.
Yeah, so all of the Tech 90s, once we get done broadcasting, they're usually up within about 24 hours, and we do post them on our website, and then we put them up on YouTube. You go to YouTube and then type in GREE Comfort, and you should be able to find a Tech 90.
And so we have Cecil. He was asking, when you use one controller to operate multiple indoor units, will each indoor unit read and control the set temperature asked for?
Well, when you're using one controller to control multiple indoor units, they're all going to have to carry the same set point. You're not going to be able to go in there and set separate set points for each one.
Okay. That makes sense. And so Sean was asking, not sure you spoke of electrical option to pull off of the outdoor unit to power the indoor heads. Is there a limit how many units you could pull off? I lost my place here. Off the outdoor unit?
So he's talking about the quick reference guide refers to, and I forget what the actual terminology we call that, but Jesus, can you look at that real quick and look at the quick reference guide and tell me what we call that for that, be able to power indoors off the outdoor?
Yes.
Anyway, okay. So first of all, guys, you can do that. Okay. You can power some of the indoor units from the outdoor unit. Okay. But also make sure you are realizing that if it's a new construction, new installation, you have access to the panel, you're better off to power those indoor units off of a separate breaker. Okay. Ideally, I think that this kit we're talking about is more for if I like to reserve that more like if I'm pulling out a multi-zone mini split and going back with a MultiPRO system, and I just have a couple of heads, I already have that in there. So go under resources, system documentation, go under MultiPRO, right there. Down, quick reference guide right there. All right, we scroll down just a little bit. There it is right there, MultiPRO centralized power kit. What that's for, again, is if you need to power the indoor units. Like I said, if you're taking on a multi-zone unit, you already got 14.4 wire ran to them indoor units. you can use 3 of those wires to be your power source to the indoor unit coming off of the outdoor unit. So essentially what you're going to do is you're going to have your L1, your L2, and a ground. So that's 3 of your wires. The 4th wire you won't use. Now, it's limited to 15 amps. So what I would tell you is look at your submittals. It depends on what indoor units you're using. Most of the heads are probably only going to pull like an amp or so. You only run a blower and a board. So let's, but then also we got to look at our overall power supply we got to that outdoor unit, and that we're not loading that all the way up to 15 amps, because now we don't have enough power for the condenser and all those indoor units. So probably no more than 4 is what I would tell you on a, like a wall mount or a cassette or something like that. Okay. All right. Any more questions?
Yes, we do. So we have Arif was asking, with 5-ton outdoor GMV 60 WLCTU and 7 indoor units, is it possible to use 2 4-port headers?
You'd be better off using 1 8-port header.
Right. Yeah, that's what I was thinking too.
And the system builder is going to default you to an 8-port header. Yeah, I would not use 2 headers.
So next question here we have from Cecil again. He gives explanation as to why he was asking. He said the
Man,
reason
I'm
I'm
gonna.
at
Oh, hang on just a minute, Jesus. I had to. I'm gonna revert back on that one. That's something I would have to check in selection software if we could actually do that with 2 headers, 2 4-port headers instead of an 8-port header. I don't think we can. That's a great question. We'll have to
right.
follow up with that. I don't have an answer right this second,
Right. Okay, and
but I don't think so. Is what I'm gonna tell you.
cool. And so I think Cecil was just circling back on this, the reason why he was asking. He said, the reason why I'm asking is because uh, if we wanted one controller for a home and it would keep each room at the desired temperature, and I think that's what we already answered, right? It wouldn't necessarily do that.
Well, you can do that with a central controller.
Right.
Okay, so you'd have an individual wired controller for each room or remote. You could have a central controller that would give you one point of location to go in there and adjust the temperature in each zone the way you want it, and only have to go to one controller to do it. So either central control, or in our quick start guide, we can kind of show that and highlight that a little bit. If we go down just a little bit in control options, come down a little bit, right there. You see that CE52-24F central controller. That's what you'd want to use in that instance. Or the other option you would have, that GMV CGA01 is cool automation control. It will do up to 6 indoor units. You can go to the Cool Master, which will do up to 32 indoor units, and Cool Master Pro, which does up to 255 indoor units. Now, with that, you'll be able to control it with your phone. You can go to a tablet. You do it on a computer. Doesn't matter. And that would give you more of a central location to be able to control all your units without having to run all over the house. I actually like the Cool Master myself better than I do the central control. But if you said you got 7 indoor units, keep in mind that GMV CG-A01 only does 6 indoor units. So you'd have to use 2 of those. Well, on one outdoor unit, we can't use 2 of them. So you would have to either use central control or Cool Master. And if you go to Cool Master, that's going to be a little bit more pricier than doing the GMV CGA01 is going to be more expensive. Doing a Cool Master versus that one's more expensive. Central control is an affordable option. If they're just looking for a place in one segment of the house where they can control everything, that's one way to do it. So there's multiple different options. All right, what else we got?
All right. So we have RF. He was asking about another debugger tool. So he said, "What is the use of MZ230V tester DFS multi-zone tester debugger? Can we use it
That's
for
for a
multi?"
multi-zone mini split, not for MultiPRO.
Okay.
Okay, and that's only for uh, the multi-zone mini split. And I'll be honest with you, if it was me having to buy a service tool for mini splits, we're kind of getting off topic here. I would buy the single zone service tool because the single zone service tool will also work on a multi-zone mini split, for data. But just remember, whichever head you're hooked to, you're only going to see the indoor information for that head we're hooked to. So if you're hooked up on A circuit, you're only going to see A circuit indoor unit information. You will see all the outdoor information. You only see A circuit indoor. And then B, if you're hooked to B, you only see B indoor, and you'll see all the outdoor. But the thing I like about that tool is it's more versatile. I can use it on single zone, I can use it on multi-zone, and I can also use it to simulate an indoor unit or simulate an outdoor unit to help a guy troubleshoot for an E6 error code, which is one of our most popular calls that we get and one of the most common calls we get. And having that service tool just makes it really simple as far as doing troubleshooting for a communication error.
Right.
On mini splits. Now, MultiPRO has the service tool as well. If we scroll down here, yeah, we don't have the service tool listed there. We're going to be having another document coming on our website soon that's going to list all of our service tools and what products they're for. So that's coming as well.
All right. So
what else we got?
Arif had one more question. He was asking, he said, A-port. So the A-port header is for higher capacities, right?
Well, yeah, because of the fact that you're doing, more than 4 indoor units. So even if you're only doing 5, you'd use an 8-port header.
Exactly.
If you're doing 6, you'd use an 8-port header.
Right. Because there's only two types, right? There's the 4 and the 8.
And the thing is, before I would, like I said, I can look in selection software and see if we can actually do 2 headers. I don't think we can. If you're going to the point of needing to go with 2, if you wanted to try to do 2 4-port headers, and the only logical reason I can think of that why you'd want to do that is because you're trying to keep your line set distances from the header to the indoor unit below 49 feet. So we keep our pipe sizes the same as at the connection of the indoor units. Okay. In that case, if that's what you're trying to do, because you can't centrally locate the header to be able to pick up all of your indoor units and without having to upsize pipe coming from the header to the indoor unit, that's my recommendation is, okay, now that's a job I would lay out in selection software, and I would use multiple Ys, because realistically, you're going to end up with less pipe. You're going to use less refrigerant pipe using multiple Ys in that scenario than you would be trying to do 2 different headers or upsizing pipe and all that. So yeah, if you can't centrally locate an 8-port header and be able to stay underneath that 49-foot rule from the header to the indoor unit, we can't go over 49 feet without the potential of having a pipe size change. So if that's what you're trying to avoid, then I would use selection software for your layout and do the multiple Y setup instead. You're going to use less refrigerant pipe. So if we go under right there at the top of that web page, you can see it that we're showing right now is the GMV selection software. If you guys don't have it, you can click on that and you can download the selection software. All right, any more questions?
No, so far that's it.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Those are great questions. I appreciate the involvement. That's the whole idea of doing these Tech 90s, right?
Right.
So
great.
All right. Well,
I did want to mention one thing before we move on.
Yes, sir.
I know we referenced it in the quick reference guide, but I think it would be good just to go over the piping rules and the upsizing after the 50 feet, because I mean, you know as well as I know how many calls we've gotten to where things have already been installed, and it's like, No, they didn't follow that rule.
Okay, so Jesus, that's going to be covered in that video that James does on basic layout.
Oh, okay, I got you.
So one of that video segments is going to cover that. So, but we'll come back and talk about it some more after we play the video. So let's go ahead and run our next run of videos here with the header installation, Y branch installation, tips when using shielded wiring, MultiPRO condensers explained, MultiPRO basic layout rules, startup commissioning of the GMV6 Ultra, and the alternate method. So let's roll through those videos. Some of those videos are really short. So you guys, I think you're going to like this. So let's play through those, and then we'll come back, answer more questions, and we can be more elaborate about the 49-foot rule. Okay?
Right.
All right, let's roll.
Hi, I'm James from GREE with an installation tip to make your MultiPRO job easier. We've got refrigerant headers. These headers are used to connect multiple indoor units, but they have to be installed in a particular way. They cannot be installed this way or this way. They must be level with the ends pointing out just like this. The liquid line header must be installed in this orientation so that the liquid line will go below the suction lines and into the indoor units. If you need that to be reversed, you simply flip your suction header so that the piping comes in from the other side, and then you again place your liquid header so that it sits where the liquid line comes out from underneath the suction lines. If these are not installed correctly, the system will not work properly. At GREE, we're by your side. Hi, I'm James McIntyre from GREE with an installation tip for MultiPRO. When installing Y branches, there are 3 ways that they can be installed for them to be installed properly. 1, if they're horizontal, they must be level. If they're leaning one way or the other, it can absolutely affect the performance of the system. If the outdoor unit is installed higher than the indoor units, the Y branch can be installed this way, but it must be plumb or straight up and down. If the outdoor unit is below the indoor units, it can be installed this way, but it must be plumb, otherwise known as straight up and down. If they are leaning, it will affect performance of the system. And that's why it's a good idea to have a level on the job site. At GREE, we're by your side. Let's talk about shielded wiring. Shielded wiring is recommended on jobs that may have a large amount of noise, but we do not require its use. If you are using shielded wiring, the shielding must be grounded. In our case, to ensure proper operation, you'll take the shield ground, which is normally a silver-colored uninsulated wire, also known as a drain, and connect it directly to the ground at the outdoor unit, and at the outdoor unit only. For single zone and multi-zone units, you'll ground the shielding at only the outdoor unit's ground. In the case of daisy chain communication, like what is found in our MultiPRO line, you'll ground the shielding at the outdoor unit, tie the 2 grounds together at each indoor unit without grounding them. Make sure they cannot touch the cabinet. We suggest using electrical tape, wire nuts, or butt splices for the shield ground itself. At the last indoor unit, you'll cut off the excess and ensure that it won't ground inside the unit. This ensures proper operation of the unit. Thanks for watching. At GREE, we're by your side.
So we had a follow-up question to the MultiPRO charging question on the 4 heads, if you recall. It said, is there a charge in the MultiPRO condenser? Yes, the MultiPRO condenser has refrigerant.
Yes.
But depending on the model, right? Some are not, and of course it depends on the model, right? But some are not charged for any length of line set at all. And some of those models are charged for 65 feet. And I believe the delineation, correct me if I'm wrong, Greg, but the standard MultiPRO, the standard heating MultiPRO is charged for 0 feet, while the Ultra Heat is charged for 65 feet. Is that correct?
The Ultra Heat B revision.
Okay. All right. So
The new Ultra Heat, that's the VV in the model number.
Right.
That unit is not charged for any refrigerant lines inside at all or indoor equipment.
I got you. So if you have any indoor units at all, you're going to be adding refrigerant to the outdoor.
Correct.
Okay, or to the system. All right, gotcha. So all current product is 0 feet. Okay.
Yep.
On MultiPRO.
Here at GREE, we all like making things as simple as possible. MultiPRO systems can utilize up to 10 indoor units and hundreds of feet of piping, and we have software called MultiPRO Selector available at GreeComfort.com that makes that pretty easy. However, most systems will have a simpler layout and much shorter piping. So we have developed a tool we're calling the basic layout. A basic layout is a system that has only one indoor unit, a system using 2 indoor units connected by a Y branch, or a system using 3 to 8 indoor units using only one 4-port header or an 8-port header. The vast majority of MultiPRO systems will have this simplified layout. Before going on to talk about when you'll use the basic layout, let's discuss when you wouldn't. If your system design must meet any of the following criteria, you'll use MultiPRO Selector instead of the basic layout. If you need more than one Y branch, or if you need more than one header, you'll use the MultiPRO Selector. If your job requires longer than the piping length described within the basic layout, you'll use the MultiPRO Selector. Finally, if you need more than 8 indoor units, you'll again use the MultiPRO Selector. The piping limitations of the single zone basic layout are simple. For the 2 and 2.5 ton single zone, the maximum length from the outdoor unit to the indoor unit is 328 feet. For the 3 ton, 4 ton, and 5 ton, the maximum length is 393 feet. The maximum height difference when the outdoor unit is above the indoor unit is 98 feet for the 2 and 2.5 ton, and 164 feet for the 3 ton and up. The maximum height difference when the outdoor unit is below the indoor unit is 98 feet for the 2 and 2.5 ton, and 131 feet for the 3 ton and above. A little more complex than the single zone basic layout, the dual zone basic layout has shorter overall line set limitations to keep things simple. The maximum length from the outdoor unit to the Y branch is 98 feet. The maximum length from the Y branch to either indoor unit is 30 feet. The maximum height difference is 98 feet, just like the maximum line set length. The size of the main piping, or the piping from the outdoor unit to the Y branch, is determined by the capacity of the outdoor unit. The piping size from the Y branch to the indoor unit is determined by the capacity of the indoor unit. In most cases, smaller rooms will be using 1/4 and 1/2 inch, while almost all larger spaces will be using 3/8 and 5/8 line set. Even at its most complex, the multi-zone MultiPRO basic layout is still simple with easy to follow rules. This layout will always utilize a 4-port or 8-port header. Each zone cannot exceed 4 tons. As before, the piping size from the outdoor unit to the header are determined by the capacity of the outdoor unit. The piping sizes from the header to the indoor units are determined by the indoor unit capacity. The piping length limitations are the same as the dual zone basic layout. 30 feet may seem a bit short, but think about it like this. A Y branch or header will have a radius of 30 feet all the way around it. If that were placed in the center of a building, you could hypothetically cover a space of more than 2,800 square feet. How many spaces of that size require less than 5 tons? Almost none. But if you do come across a job that won't meet the specs of a basic layout, our MultiPRO Selector is easy to use and provides a printout that includes system information like piping and wiring diagrams. Simple or complex, at GREE we make it as easy as possible. GREE, we're by your side.
Hi, Greg with GREE here. Wanted to show you the proper startup procedure to the new GMV6 Ultra. The predecessor, the GMV5 Ultra, you didn't have to put it through a debug process. This machine you do. So as you will see on the display here, it's saying 01, then AO, and it goes back to 01, goes to AO. It's not an error code, it's just that you're ready for debug. Now, so before you put it through debug, I would recommend you go inside. If it's got a display right on the wall mount, it'll say AO. If it's a ducted unit or a cassette, then it's going to say AO on the wired controller. Any of those machines that don't say AO, you don't want to start debug yet. Let's go ahead and maybe check power, make sure the thing's got 230 volts to it, because all the GMV indoor units are 230 volt powered. We don't have any 115 volt powered ones. And you may need to go back and double check your D1 and D2 communication wiring to make sure that we don't have, a loose connection, or we missed hooking up a head, or whatever it may be. Because all of those indoor units should say AO. Once you've got that, you're going to find the 4 red buttons. You've got SW1, SW2, SW3, SW4, top to bottom. So SW3 is your confirm button. So if you just press and hold that for about 5 seconds. I always say at least 10. Then you let go, and it should automatically start. See, it says O2AD. And it's just going to do its own thing here.
O2 AD, O3, OC, O1, O3. That means step 3, 1 outdoor unit. That's what that means. We might have to hit confirm on this one. So if that's the case, SW3 one time, and it should go further on. 04, I guess since it's 04, it just says 04, because normally what they would say was 04, 04, 04, 04, which means step 4, 4 indoor units. But I guess because it's the same, it's not bouncing. But I know I have 4 indoor units, so I can just go ahead and hit SW3 one time and confirm it, and it should move on. Yep, step 5, step 6, and you just got to let it do its thing. There it goes, going to 07. So now it's in step 7. If there's something wrong, it'll stop debug and give you an error code. 08UO. What that means is this machine requires an 8-hour compressor warm-up. This has been powered for at least 2 hours or so. We do allow you to override that with rules. So if it's 50 degrees or above, it's 1 hour. If it's 32 to 50, it's 2 hours. 14 to 32, it's 4 hours. Below 14 degrees, it's the full 8 hours. And we want to go by the temperature that has been the coldest in the last 24 hours. So, you know, if it got down to 0 at night, the night before, and you're going to start that thing up the very next morning and it's 40 degrees, we need to go by that 0 degree temperature. That's what we mean by that. As long as we've reached our warm-up period, you just hit SW3 one time, that'll override it, and it should move on. There it goes, with step 9. So now it's in step 10. So at step 10, it's going to start the compressor for a minute, it's going to start the fans for a minute, it's probably going to cycle the indoors a little bit. It's doing its own checks. It's making sure you open the service valves. This machine's smart enough that if you didn't open those service valves, you're going to get an error code. This whole process only lasts about 2 minutes, and then once it's done, then it'll move into step 11. Now, the other thing it does too is it auto addresses. Same with the GMV5. So that's something to be mindful of. Once you commission the unit and they've addressed themselves, check with that homeowner and make sure that whatever unit that was designated the master is the unit you want to be the master. It's going to pick one of those indoor units as master. So master determines mode. So if you have the master in heat, that means that none of the other units are going to be allowed to be put in cool mode, is what I'm getting at. So it may be important for the homeowner to understand that and know which one's their master, so they know which one that is going to give them their mode control from season to season and stuff like that. It can be changed. In the wired controller, it's a parameter setting, and then on the remote, we also have instructions for that as well. So it's step 12 AE, 15 AC. So when it hits 15 AC, it's either going to hit 15 AC or it's going to hit 16 AH. You have no choice. It does it by the ambient temperature. And what the machine's going to do now is it is going to start this thing up and run in cooling mode and do its whole debug process, and that takes about 50 minutes. I always tell guys on the phone, go get a donut and come back in about an hour, because right now you just need to let it do its thing. It'll run its whole debug process. When it's done, you'll come back to the machine. It'll say OF, meaning off. And all of your indoor units will say off as well. And then you're good to go. Then you can just set it to heat or cool, whichever season you need to put it into, and let it run. So while it's running a debug, especially if it's running debug and cooling, you can add your additional charge at that time. A couple other things I want to point out. Don't worry about putting liquid in that low side, because you've got 2 accumulators in this unit. Even if you dump liquid in low side, when it goes to start up, it's got to get through those accumulators before it would slug the compressor. So you're good to go. Just dump your charge in both high and low side, and then you can isolate your tank off like I've got mine isolated off, because whatever's left in my hoses, I'm going to bleed into the machine. That's it. We're going to let it do its thing now, and I guess we'll button it all up after it's ran for 50 minutes. So I hope this helps you out, and with GREE, we're always by your side.
let's talk about the comment. Another option is to apply a portable debugger or connect to a computer via converter. All the process is visualized, then I can grasp the whole process. That's definitely something that you can do. Is we do have a portable commissioning tool that can connect to this, and it assists in the startup process of it. It is not required to use that tool for that startup process. It's a simple push button process, but either way, you can do that. The portable debugger also shows you your temperatures and your pressures for everything on the system. Now, I will say that you can also see all that information through a wired controller if your system has one. You can see the pressures, temperatures, the target compressor speed, the target hertz, your DC bus. Instead of pulling out a meter and measuring the DC voltage on your inverter board, you can see what that's being measured at the wired controller or at a portable debugger. Greg, would you like to add something to that?
Well, the new GMV6 Ultra, that whole debug process, step by step, just pushing the buttons on the board is right there on the service panel. Right. Makes it extremely easy. You don't have to have the service tool, although I encourage the use of the service tool because, like you said, it gives you a lot more information, and you can see the whole system from one spot. You don't have to go to multiple indoor units to see, pressures and all that kind of stuff. But as far as startup goes, when I started up the one that I was testing, I had the portable service tool right there, and I just used the board because it was so easy just to toggle. It's just pushing a couple buttons and letting it go through its process. So whether you're doing it with the service tool or you're doing it just by pushing the buttons right there on the board, it's a pretty simple process to run through it. Now, if you have a glitch in it, in other words, you have an error code, this service tool might give you a little bit more information. Generally speaking, if your debugging process stops and you get an error code, then you can refer to the service manual. You can also look at right on the service panel of the door. It gives you all the error codes. You could have a very simple error code. I mean, I give you a simple example of one that I dealt with where the guy was going through debug, and all of a sudden, I forget the error code number right off the top of my head, but it was stuck right there. And I'm like, I look up the error code. I'm like, okay, you got no power to the indoor unit. Well, they were wiring the float switch, for the condensate pump was fused, and they were fusing the condensate pump and the air handler with a 1/2 amp fuse. So as soon as the air handler tried to start the blower, it blew the fuse. So it was a very simple, correct the wiring, only fuse the pump, ran it through debug, no big deal. But that's just one example, and I'm not trying to make fun of anybody or anything like that. It's just, it could be that simple. If it doesn't complete debug, there's an error. It's going to pop the error code, and then you'll know where to go next, whether you look at the service manual or if you use the service tool. Again, I don't think you're going to have the service tool for that.
Right.
As long as you get on the website, get our service manual, because the installation instructions is what the machine comes with. It doesn't give you the service manual. If you download the service manual, then it'll give you the error code listing and point you in the direction where you need to be, and maybe some helpful pointers of what could be going wrong.
Right.
Usually on a new installation, it's pretty simple. It's not going to be a major error code like a board failure or anything like that. I just don't see that happening.
Right. I think that's something we kind of brush across, is the fact that these do show your error codes. Traditional system, if it didn't operate, you're like, okay, well, let me start from, okay, do I have power? Do I have 24 volts? Do I have this? You're just following that chain. And sure, we're all accustomed to that at this point. But with an error code, you can bypass a lot of that stuff, right? And go directly, it gives you a direction to go into. You can go directly to what that problem might be. For instance, like in the case of your error code, that you're talking about.
And it does a good job of telling you whether it's an indoor or an outdoor error code.
Yeah.
So you know whether it's on an indoor unit or it's on an outdoor unit. That was a 1-to-1 system, so it was really easy to go to that on the example that I had. But had it been 1 to multiple, the error code would have only been on the machine that they miswired the condensate pump. It wouldn't have been on every single head.
Right. So, I mean, even the push button process for the startup, it's just the SW3 button. You press and hold it once, and then you press to confirm the amount of indoor units you have, and then you press it one more time to start the debugging process. There's nothing to it. There's all kinds of numbers and letters and stuff like that it might show you, and that means a lot to us. We have an explanation for that on our website for the startup procedure, gives it a step-by-step kind of thing. But for all intents and purposes, it is a 3-step process. It's about as complicated as going and turning on one of those really fancy thermostats, right? Without all the time delays and everything.
Well, James, you ain't wrong there, because some of the setup menus and them thermostats take you a good 15, 20 minutes just to go through the setup menu on the thermostat.
Right, and as a company, we've become a lot more familiar with those setup processes for those thermostats. With the Flex or with the MultiPRO, the 24-volt adapter. I'm like, man, they weren't lying when they said this thing was universal. It's got a lot of options. It's got a 30-step process to set up a thermostat.
All right, we're back. So I hope you enjoyed those video segments. A lot of good reminders and stuff in there. So back to questions. We got some more rolling in here, Jesus.
Yeah, so we got Arif. He's asking, when you have more than 5 indoor units for one outdoor GMVV, what would you recommend for a single point power connection kit? Or is there a way to utilize the SPK1?
So the way I would answer that is you need to look at the submittal sheets for the indoor units that you're using, because it depends on the size of those units and how many amps you're actually going to be pulling and whether or not you could do 5 units off of the SPK1. If you're not sure or you want to err on the side of caution, the absolute best way to do it is power those indoor units on a separate breaker from the breaker panel. So, and the other recommendation, I think it was talked about in all these videos and stuff, I highly recommend that there be a disconnect switch at each indoor unit. Now, if it's an air handler and you got electric heat in there, you're going to have to use a true AC disconnect. But if you're just doing a wall mount or a cassette or something like that, you can use a 15 amp 2-pole breaker. It has to be a 2-pole breaker because you have to break both L1 and L2. So when you turn that switch off, there's absolutely no power to that head. I highly recommend that. Not only mostly it just gives you the ability to service that unit in one indoor unit at a time without having to kill power to the entire system. So you may have to service one indoor unit, but you can leave all the rest powered up and the machine still heating or cooling while you're working on that one indoor unit, because you're able to kill the power to just that unit. As long as we're maintaining our 50% connected capacity, the unit can still function. So say you're waiting on a board for an indoor unit. Instead of having to have the power off to all of them, you can have the power off just to that one unit, and you wait till you get your replacement board, or a motor or whatever else you might be doing. So, all right, don't forget about that ask a question button on the right-hand side of your screen. And if you got any questions, please submit them. Hey, Jesus.
Yes, sir.
Let's talk about that MultiPRO basic layout rules. You kind of wanted to elaborate on that. We talked about it in the video, or James talked about it in the video. Keep in mind, guys, I had the disclaimers put up there because way back when James did that video, the rule was 30 feet from a Y branch to a header was the maximum you can go without the possibility of having to upsize your pipe. So that rule's been changed. That rule is now 49 feet. And keep in mind, if you do upsize the pipe, let's say you're using a header and you upsize that pipe going to the indoor unit because of the fact that you're over 49 feet, right? So quarter 3/8 connection to a 9K head. 9K head is going to be quarter 3/8, okay? If you're going to go over 49 feet, that would be going to 3/8 and half, okay? So now from the header, I got 3/8 pipe, 1/2 inch pipe, all the way to the indoor unit. My connections at the unit are quarter 3/8. So now you got to reduce back down to be able to actually make the connection to the flare joint on that unit. So that's when I tell you, when you get in those scenarios, you may be better off to use selection software and use multiple Y connections, because when you're using multiple Ys, now you can get that Y branch closer to that indoor unit and stay within the 49-foot rule. And then you don't have to change pipe size. It just makes it, now your pipe size coming off your header or Y, or actually off a Y, would be the same size as your connection at the indoor unit. And it's going to be a whole lot easier to do, right?
Right.
So, but you're right, Jesus. We do get quite a few guys out there that are not following those rules without upsizing the pipe.
Right. And I think that has to do with, well, that doesn't have to do with, but, you know, just what we always say about, you know, centrally locating that header. That way you do stay within those, you know, pipe links. That way you're not having to worry about upsizing pipe. And, you know, obviously once you do get into a situation where you have to, well, then you're going to go ahead and do that to where, you know, it's, even if it's in a central location, it's still pretty far. So,
Yeah, and because there's some job layouts, even if you put it right center of the building, where you want that indoor unit may exceed that 49-foot rule. So in that case, that's where I was saying, those cases, what I would do is revert back and use selection software and lay that job out with multiple Ys. And then that way you get your Y branches closer to your indoor units and you don't have to worry about changing pipe size. My home exactly is that way because my unit sits on one side of the house, and trying to, I'd had to run piping all the way to the center of the house to centrally locate the header and then come back the other way, both to each side of the house. It just made more sense to lay that out in selection software. And my piping starts at one end of the house, goes to a Y, picks up one unit, goes to another Y, picks up the other indoor unit. Then we go all the way across the house to another Y, which picks up the last two indoor units. You use less pipe, and I don't have to change pipe sizes. It's going to stay the same from the header to the indoor unit, right? So it all depends on the application, but there's a whole bunch of jobs out there, and that's why we came up with the basic layout rules. Is there's so many jobs you can do that it's not hard to centrally locate the header and be able to stay within the 49-foot rule.
right.
So, all right, any more questions coming up?
Yes, so we have one from Matthew. He's asking, are there any extra certifications needed for GMV units? He's saying, only asking as my distributor does not offer GMV series.
No, there's no extra certifications. It's like any other piece of equipment, though. I would highly recommend that you joined in on some of our trainings. I've done, I don't know how many multi-pro trainings. There's a whole bunch of them in our YouTube library and on our website. The quick start guide answers a lot of questions. The service manual answers a lot of questions. Be familiar with the installation before you install one of these units. So if your particular distributor doesn't offer them and you really like the MultiPRO system, I would push on them to see if they can't start bringing that in and actually get you the GMV units. So it's a much cleaner look than a multi-zone unit, in my opinion. You got one set of refrigerant lines landing to your condenser outside. All your other piping's within a crawl space, attic, wherever you have to run your piping. It's just a much cleaner look outside. They're very dependable and durable units. The biggest difference between, well, not one of the differences between MultiPRO versus a multi-zone mini split, and the reason we can get away with one set of piping running in like that is because all of your indoor units actually house the EEVs. On a multi-zone mini split, your EEVs are in the outdoor unit. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but that's why you're able to do the piping the way you do with a GMV unit. So, and that CAN bus technology we use for communication with that 18-2 wire is highly reliable. They've been using CAN bus in the automotive industry for years. It works very well. Very few communication issues.
And so he just commented, he said, thank you. Brands such as LG and Mitsubishi require that.
Oh, okay. Well, we don't have any special certifications, but guys, I'm telling you, you need to be familiar with what you're doing before you do it, right? I mean, I've had calls where a guy thought he was getting a multi-zone mini split when he got a MultiPRO system and he's trying to install it like a multi-zone mini split, and they're two different worlds, right? You don't use 14-4 wire with the GMV unit. So, and there's more we can do with GMV that we can't do with a multi-zone mini split. For example, using that cool automation or the central controller, that if you got 6 or 7 indoor units, you can control them from all one central location, right? So in the Wi-Fi with cool automation far exceeds what GREE offers us in the Wi-Fi capabilities. With the Wi-Fi capabilities and cool automation is even better. One thing you don't get on GREE's Wi-Fi, if you have an error code on that machine, it will not give you the error code on the Wi-Fi. It will give you the error code on cool automation's Wi-Fi. So there's advantages to using MultiPRO systems.
Yep.
And I think, you know, it looks more complicated than it really is. I tell the guys all the time, you know, they're complex units. But once you get the basics down and install one of these systems, you won't have any issues. Follow your best practices. Make sure you follow the instructions from GREE and how you need to run your piping. Make sure you're insulating everything. Make sure you're installing Y branches and headers properly. Make sure you're flowing nitrogen while you're brazing. Make sure you do a proper pressure test and evacuation. If you follow best practices, you're not going to have a lot of problems with the machine. I just did a training. I had a contractor come up to me. He said he's put in 36 MultiPRO units and he's had 0 issues. He goes, "You're absolutely right. If you follow proper installation procedures, you're not going to have issues." And he does. He says, "I put in 36 of them and I have not had a problem with a single one yet." So that was encouraging to hear when I was doing that training. You know, got guys out there, you know, wanting to do it right. Take pride in your work. That's the other thing I try to tell guys all the time. It doesn't take any longer to do a job sloppy than it does to do it neat, right? That was instilled in me when I first got in this field. Do the job right. Make it look nice. You know, I can still remember I was working with an old man back when I was in the field, and we were installing gas furnaces. The first gas furnace I piped, he told me, he says, "Hey, Greg, come here. I want to show you something." I said, "Okay." And the gas pipe coming down to the furnace from the floor joist is a basement install. He slapped his level on it. He goes, "That look level to you?" I said, "No, sir." He goes, "I don't want to see that again. Straighten it up." But you can bet after that, every time I did my gas pipe into a furnace, I had a level on that pipe. And he was right. He was absolutely right. You know, when you stand back and look at that job, you should be proud of your installation. Your pipes should be straight. Everything should be neatly done. He's absolutely correct. So just a little tidbit, pass on to guys. You know, you learn from your mistakes, right? I learned from mine when I was out in the field, right? Try to keep them to a minimum, though. You know, when you let out that magic smoke, now you made a mistake you're never going to forget.
Yep.
Right? Tell me you ain't never done that, Jesus.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. You know what? If you are in the HVAC field and you never make any mistakes, there's only one reason that's happening. It's because you're sitting at home on your couch. Because we all make mistakes. Just happens. We're not perfect. I'm not perfect. So
that's true. And like you're saying, yeah, you definitely do learn from them. So the last time I was going to do that.
We got any more questions coming in?
Yeah, so we have Sean. He's asking, are the slides you showed earlier in the presentation in the MultiPRO quick start guide if we are ordering literature?
The slides for the controller are not in there. I refer to the installation instructions. Those are screenshots that I took off of controllers just to show you more like as if I was standing in front of the controller. This is what I'm looking for. But the instructions do tell you how to set up those parameters.
It looks like that is, yep, I think we're all caught up on the questions.
Cool.
Yep.
All right. Guys, I know the weather's warming up throughout the country, you know, so I kind of felt like, you know, if this one ran a little short, that would be okay with you guys as well. It's okay with me too. I know we're all getting busy because we're getting into the summer season. So with that, we're going to go ahead and close it out. If you guys have any suggestions or anything like that, we will leave the Q&A up. So if you got suggestions of what you might want to see next, anything we're doing or not doing right. We take positive feedback, we take negative feedback, whatever punches you want to throw at us. We're men, we can handle it. With that, agree, we're by your side.